Good morning. If you'd like to see how we made these wooden brackets to hold an ammo loading machine, stay tuned because that's what we're going to do today. Good morning and welcome to Memphis Monday 336. Today we got a project that we're going to make a wooden bracket to hold my friend's ammo loader. I look like it, but I'm not, and that is a gun and knives and all that stuff. My friend is really into it. He has guns and knives, and I was in the military for 26 years. He shoots more in one day than I shot in my entire career in the military. He loads buckets full of ammo. Well, he has I don't know exactly how it works, but it's a machine that presses the bullets in and presses the primers out and this and that. But it needs a bracket to get it up off the bench, and it has to be really strong because this thing has a big old handle with a lot of leverage on it. So we need just a super strong bracket, and we can do it. So let's knock off the chit chat and do it. We're going to make two of these. This is we're going to make it out of 3/4 inch plywood with box joints. It's essentially a box with the ends open, and it's going to have provisions to be attached to the workbench with hanger bolts with these little thumb screws. And so we need to find us some exterior plywood that's at least 8 inches wide. This may be a takeaway, guys. You know how we keep all this wood? If you're a woodworker, you know what I'm talking about. We do a project and we have a few scraps of wood left. We end up keeping it. Well, the takeaway is that if you're going to keep all this wood, you probably ought to use it at some point. And here's a perfect example. This is a kind of a failed project right here. It's actually a pretty good project, but the problem is it's not very usable because it's too heavy. I use it to stand on when I'm working on overhead projects, but it's way too heavy to be practical. And this is from my boat building days. See that hatch right there? That's an oak cargo hatch that I've been saving to recycle. Problem is I've been saving it for about 5 years. Let's take this cargo hatch and see if we can recycle it. So what I do is take this thing apart and cut it into 8-inch strips. Looks like I can probably get about 3 of them, and go from there. This hatch is actually a real nice hatch. The cargo hold, was inside these lips here. This thing's totally waterproof, and you can stand on it. Let's inappropriately test this joiner's mallet we worked on 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's guys that say I build things too strong are right. Talk about a 10,000 year guarantee. That's how you wreck planer blades. This wood was covered with, this is oak, dry oak, and it was covered in epoxy, soaked in epoxy, and then covered with about 3 layers of boat paint. And it just totally destroyed my planer blades. By the end, I was pushing them through. I'm not supposed to do that. Before I do much more, I'm going to go through. This is recycled wood, so it's got some holes in it and some defects. I'm going to just put some wood filler. These are utility items. They don't have to be perfect, but you know, I'm going to be presentable anyway. Got the stock all sanded up. Solid oak. I think it's going to look pretty good. Over here, I got a, I was working on my dado setup, so I made a little prototype for us to look at. We're going to be putting box joints in the corners, and of course it's going to be open in here. Let's go take a look at that box joint setup. Box joint jigs are pretty easy. It's like really only 3 things to worry about. One is the spacer. One is the space between the spacer and the dado set. Then you got the dado set, and then you got the wood thickness. And if you get that wrong, it's no big deal. But these 3 have got to be pretty accurate. Here I've drawn a little schematic of this. Here's the spacer. Just about all dado jigs have a spacer that sort of increments the slots. Then there's a space between the spacer and the dado set, right in here, and I've colored that blue. And then you got your dado set. And if you don't have a dado set, you can use one blade and just increment your increment your board over until you cut out that space. Now what I do is I have a little, I even got it written on here, I just saw. Little block of wood that says 1.5 inch box spacer. So I got it already cut up. So I can come over here and check the spacer, make sure that's the right distance, the right thickness, the space is the right distance, and the spacer is the right distance. And what is the right distance? It's any distance you want, any thickness you want, but the three have to be essentially the same. You can make your dado set just a 64th bigger if you want to. Okay, let's go over to the saw and see this in real life. Okay, I hope I get you set up where you can see. This is let's go through the 4 things you got to get right. First thing is the spacer. And this is a little piece of wood you put in here that's the exact same width as you want to make your box joints. So I got my little spacer here. It's exactly the same size as that spacer. As a matter of fact, I cut it out of the same stock. The next thing, number 2, is the space, and that should go right down between the dado blade and the spacer. So it's in here in this space. It's exactly the right size. And then the thickness of your blade also is exactly the same as that spacer. That's number 3. Okay, then number 4, you want to take a piece of your stock that you're going to be cutting your blades or your box joints from, cut a little hunk of it off, lay it in here to make sure your blade is just above the thickness of your stock. Okay, let's cut some, and I'll give you some more tips. So in this application, I'm going to be using, I got long sides and short sides. I'm going to do all the box joints on the long sides the same. So I'll have the same box joints here and same box joints down there. And then when I sequence the boards, do the short side, I'll show you another trick. Okay, so the first thing you do is you take your board and you put it right up against that spacer, just like that. Now you just index that board all the way along there, right there in that spacer. And the theory is all your box joints will be exactly the same. Let's give it a try. Okay, we just did our full line of box joints here. Now this is the first one we made. Remember, we slid it right against there. So we want to duplicate that down here at the other end. So let's make sure we do that. So there's my first one I made. So I want that right down here at the end. So I'm going to put this right up against that spacer, just like we did before, and start my box joints there. Now remember, we made a big deal about starting this and making this first box joint, or this first cut, identical on both sides. Now we're just going to do sort of the mirror image of that. We take that big notch, that first notch right there, and we put it back on the spacer, and then we take our other board and slide it right up against it like that. Okay, and cut your, and start from there. Now alternatively, you can take that little spacer that I showed you, and if the world is perfect, that little spacer right there will fit right in there, and you can actually space it using that little spacer. But the standard way of doing it, the way everybody does it, is by putting this board in there like that. Okay? Now, lots of things can happen with box joints, and one of the most common problems is that debris will get under the box joints and mess up the depth of the cut. You can eyeball it and see that these three right here are about a 1/16 of an inch shy of the right depth, and you can double check that. You check all of them, as a matter of fact, by running a straight edge there, and you can see I got about a 1/16 of an inch here that I need to take out. Now what's happened is probably on this one right here, there was some debris underneath one of the fingers or under the spacer here that made this one too shallow, and then that just carried it on. So I'll clean up my jig and recut these three. Now the smart thing to do is keep an air nozzle over here. Now you can see why we made a big deal about that one cut. Our first notch was right here on this long board. And then on our short board, our first notch was right there. Now I'm going to give you another takeaway. This may sound funny. You can kind of almost forget about everything I said about all this alignment and keeping it straight and everything. If you just make all your, if all your box joints line up, what you can do is just make your stock a little wider. And then after you get done and it's all glued up, just take the table saw and trim it off and smooth it all out, even it all out. I've done that before too. We got our glue up done. Let's let these dry and I'll show you how we smooth out these corners. Well, you just saw me grinding off the excess here, smoothing out the box joints. You might have noticed I didn't use a backing board when I was making the box joints. You don't always have to do that. If you're making box joints with soft wood or plywood, you probably need a backer board. But with some oak, for some reason, it doesn't blow out. So there's our box joints. Let me show you how these things are secured to your workbench. These things are secured to the workbench as a hole, actually 2 holes down through the bottom. And you take these are called hanger bolts. Hanger bolts. They screw into your workbench, and then you thread your bracket onto the hanger bolt, and then you have one of these little twisty knobs secured down with. And there's one on the front here, and then there's another one on the back here, and that secures it. And then you clamp your tool that you're using up here. Or there's our ammo loading brackets for Memphis Monday 336. We used recycled oak and ruined my planer blades, which I've already changed, by the way. Held down by hanger bolts. We put box joints in all the corners. These get a 10,000 year guarantee. Over the next week or so, I'll put some poly on them, and they should be good to go. Well, that does it for Memphis Monday 336. I was watching video on YouTube about, it was 17 minutes long, covering how they built the Golden Gate Bridge. 17 minutes. I built 2 little wooden boxes about this big, and it took me and the video's like 25 minutes long. So something's not adding up here. I'm apparently not very succinct. Well, anyway, I think we got a lot of takeaways. I spent a lot of, I burned up a lot of time going over the details of how I make box joints. It's not the only way to make box joints. There's hundreds of ways. You don't need that little spacer. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the exact width of your deal. You can just make it. I've seen people slide a piece of metal in there. You don't need a dado set. You can use a single blade. There's lots of you can do it. You can do them on the router table. This is just the way I do them. All right, so like, favorite, share, and everything else you do on the internet. But most important, make sure you're back here next week for another exciting Memphis Monday. Thanks for playing along.